Hi everyone, welcome back to Wilde Reads. My name is Dave. Welcome back to the first of the Tuesday videos that are going out. For those that have seen my recent Gymwag video, you will know that Wilde Reads is going to 3 videos a week. So that's Tuesday, Thursday and Sundays. So I thought today I'd come back for the first Tuesday video with a wrap up. Now, I hope your Easter was fabulous. I hope everyone had a fantastic Easter. We've had 2 bank holidays here in the UK. I think it's the same for America. Do you get bank holidays over there as well? Or national holidays? Anyway, so we had Good Friday, Easter Sunday and bank holiday Monday. Myself and Vicky were up in Yorkshire. Again, if you've seen my recent Gymwag, you will know that we've recently had some sad news with Vicky's mother passing away. So we've been up and down to Yorkshire quite a bit, sorting a few things out. So we've had a very busy month and a bit. So consequently, that combined with a huge book hangover, which I will get to in a moment, I've not had the best reading months in the month of March. So I've only got 4 books really to wrap up. 4 books and a couple of books to tell you about that I started but I couldn't get into. Let's get on with the book. The first book I read in March was From the Heart from Susan Hill. This is Susan Hill's latest book to come out. As you will know, for regular viewers of this channel, you will know that I'm a huge Susan Hill fan, both her non-fiction and her fiction. This one is not that thick. It came out from Vintage. It's only just over 200 pages. It's a really good story. This concerns a young girl called Olive Piper who's growing up in Ireland in the 1950s. She's a big reader. She's really into her books, and on the strength of this gets her into university. She gets very good grades in English and all the other associated subjects. So she goes to university and she thinks she's mapped out her life. And then something happens to her that she hasn't quite bargained for. She falls pregnant, and in that era, in 1950, she's not married. She's going to be a single mum, coming from a Protestant or Catholic. Is she Protestant or Catholic in this book? I'm not sure. But growing up in quite an old-fashioned Ireland, she is shunned. She's shunned by society, she's shunned by her family, and she's got to make the best of things, which she does end up doing. So I'm not going to give too much away, but it's a really good story and another really good little book from Susan Hill. So I really enjoyed that one. The second book I read during March, I keep meaning to say April, but we're in April now, was The London Train by Tessa Hadley. Now, I've never read any Tessa Hadley before. I found this, I think I hold this months and months ago after finding it in a charity shop. As I say, I've never read Tessa Hadley before. I was really impressed with her writing, and she's got quite a backlist to get through, so I might end up investigating some more. Well, I probably will. In fact, I definitely will end up buying more Tessa Hadley because I really quite enjoyed it. So this is 2 stories, 2 interwoven, interconnected stories. One story is concerning the journey from somewhere to London, and the other story is concerning the journey from London to somewhere else. But both stories are interconnected in quite a clever, it's quite a subtle way, but quite a clever way. There's a central character that appears in both stories. So well worth checking out. I'm really glad I read this. The next book I read is one of those books that if you can give 6 stars to a book, if there was such thing as a 6-star rating, I usually only give 5 is my maximum, but this ended up being one of those books that you could easily give 6 stars to, and that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which is sold in huge numbers, recently been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It won, I think it won the Costa Debut Novel Award. I absolutely loved this book. I loved everything about this book. I remember tweeting at the time, you know when you get to a book and you've read the first page and you know instantly that you're going to love this book. This was one of those books. It ended up giving me, however, probably the biggest book hangover that I've ever suffered with. So the young protagonist is called Eleanor Oliphant. It's at times, this book made me laugh out loud so many times in a way that I think I've mentioned on this channel before. I don't really get comedic writing, and I don't often find books, even when they're purported to be funny, I don't often find them that funny, and I struggle with comedy writing. Even though this isn't written as a comedy, there are sketches in this book that just made me laugh so much. On the flip side of that, there are parts of this book that are incredibly sad. Some of the bits that stick in my mind are the descriptions of loneliness and acute loneliness, the sort of loneliness where after you finish work on a Friday, you don't speak to another human being till you go back into the office on Monday, and as soon as you speak, your throat feels scratchy because you haven't literally spoken to anyone. Now, thankfully, I haven't experienced that kind of loneliness before. It just goes to highlight that that kind of loneliness does exist. It must be horrible. It must be, to be that lonely must be horrible. And the feeling of loneliness must be absolutely crippling at times. This book is incredibly sad in places and incredibly funny in places as well. The story, the writing, I thought was incredible. I cannot wait to see what Gail Honeyman does with her second book. There must be so much pressure when they've had a big hit with their first debut novel. The pressure to write a follow-up that is in your mind equally as good and equally as well received must be enormous. But I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. I say it again, I absolutely love this book. Vicky read this soon after me and she loved it as well. And we passed it on to other people as well. Books like this are infectious. But on the flip side, as I mentioned, it gave me the biggest book hangover. And before I came on BookTube, I didn't really understand what a book hangover was. Basically, and I had to tweet, I put it out on Twitter, what is this? Why can't I get into a book? And Jen Campbell said to me, what you're suffering from is a book hangover. And I've made a video about book hangovers, so I will link that video down below because I found it extremely helpful. And I found another really helpful way to get out of it. Because what happens to me, and I'm sure if you suffer with book hangovers, I'm sure this happens to you as well. But you cannot get the characters out of your head. You cannot get the storyline and the plot arc out of your head when you go to read something new. Consequently, you've either got to take a week off or 2 weeks off or however long for that book to start to fade in your mind, or you've got to read something completely different. So what I did, I went off and I read pieces of poetry, I read some non-fiction, just so I could sort of cleanse the palate really, so I was ready for another fiction book. And after I read this, I tried to get into, straight as soon as I finished this, I picked up Singh Unburied Sing by Wilde, which I really wanted to read as well because that's also longlisted for the Women's Prize. And I just couldn't get into it, and I knew it wasn't the book because the book's been so well received. Reading bits of the book, I know I'm going to love that book. After reading Eleanor Oliphant, I knew that I was probably reading that book at the wrong time. I then tried to get into, I tried to read this book after that, which again, I've been meaning to get round to. This was Kate Atkinson Behind the Scenes at the Museum, which was her debut novel. And when I put this on the socials that I was starting this, I got such a big response from people saying this is one of the best books to be written in English in the last 50 years. It's one of my favourite books of all time. So I thought, oh, I'm really onto a winner here. Again, I couldn't get into it because I was still thinking, I still had Eleanor and Raymond and Sammy from Eleanor Oliphant It's Completely Fine just swimming around my head. So again, it went back to the poetry and went back and read a little bit of non-fiction as well. So I tried to get into this, just couldn't do it. So then a little bit more time went by and I picked up a book that I'd been meaning to get to for a long time, and this was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Now I'm really interested in Sylvia Plath's life. This book is essentially about madness, and I really enjoyed this, and it's about the central character's slow descent into a mad state, and she ends up in a lunatic asylum. I did really enjoy it. Again, I don't think I was reading it at the right time because I did enjoy it, I did like it, but I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to love it, because this has been floating around my shelves for years and years and years. This is an ex-library copy. Yeah, I liked it, I didn't love it, but I think again this was again a booky hangover thing. I think I'm over it now. I think I can launch into a new month. Hangover free, book hangover free. Thank God. It's been a real struggle. So anyway, so that was the fourth book I read, and I did enjoy it. What have I got reading? Well, I'm going to try and crack on with the Women's Book Prize. By the time I get round to another one of those, probably the shortlist will be out for the Women's Prize because that's out in April. I think another reason I suffered with a bit of a book hangover was I made a TBR saying what I was planning to read for spring, and I don't think personally as a reader, I don't think book TBRs work for me. As you get deeper into this and you discover more about yourself as a reader, and I'm always discovering bits and pieces about myself as a reader, I don't think that TBRing books that far in advance actually works for me because I've got those titles then in my head. So I don't necessarily want to know what I'm going to be reading in 2 books time or 3 weeks time, or I just want to read by whim. So I want to finish a book and then just go to the shelves and think, right, what do I fancy reading now? So I don't think TBRing books necessarily works for me. I know it works for a lot of other people, and people do like to some readers do like to schedule their reading, but I don't think that that's the way forward for me. I think I'm more of a I'll read by whim sort of person, sort of reader. So that's what I plan to do this month. I'm not going to plan what I'm going to read 2-3 books in advance. I'm just gonna play it by ear and just see where the reading journey takes me, because sometimes you pick up a book and you might want to, one book that you read might take you on a bit of a reading journey, so you might want to investigate something more from that author's backlist. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm reading a thriller at the moment by Helen Callahan, Dear Amy, which I'm very much enjoying. I do have a couple of books that I want to read this month, because talking about not TBRing, and I've just instantly TBR'd a couple of books, but I'm launching a book blog this month, and there's a certain book that I want to be the sort of launch title for the blog, if you like. So I'm going to be doing that. So anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. What have you been reading this month? How did your reading month go? What do you do to get over book hangovers? I'll be back. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed those books. I will be back on Thursday with another BookTube video. Until then, whatever you're doing this week, enjoy your books. And I'll see you back here on Thursday night for another BookTube video. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.